During the Cold War, there was one Russian submarine equipped with a nuclear torpedo in the Caribbean Sea. On it were 3 senior officers who were ordered to fire this torpedo when, and only when, all 3 agreed that they were under attack. The Americans, upon discovering the submarine, began dropping explosive charges as warnings, demanding that it come afloat. But the Russians didn't know that these explosions were just warnings. In fact, some of them were even convinced that a nuclear war between Russia and the United States had begun. The submarine began heating up to unbearable levels, leaving the officers to suggest launching their torpedoes before they themselves got taken out. The only thing that stopped this potentially disastrous launch was the 3rd senior officer. He realized that the explosives were being dropped only around the submarine, never on top. The Americans, he thought, only wanted identification, so he refused to launch the torpedoes. With no other choice, the submarine floated up, and to their surprise, the Americans simply let it return to Russia. And just like that, a nuclear war was avoided. This is the potential of perspective. It's powerful, it's smart, it's collaborative. Imagine 3 high-ranking officers working together to shape the course of history. But too often, we neglect this potential. We see perspective as a weapon, something that divides us, something that brings about conflict. We think this way because we're uncomfortable disagreeing. We call things, you see, humans are wired to be tribalistic. If you and I agree we're going to be on a team, that's our natural way of thinking. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this. We could be a great team. But society has decided that we should keep quiet about being on teams. That in order to avoid conflict, we must stay silent. And because we're so used to staying silent, we do a poor job at speaking our minds in the most critical moments. We call things we hesitate to speak up on controversial. They're dicey, they get heated, and most of all, they make us uncomfortable. We're generally told to keep quiet on topics like these, especially around those who don't share similar views. Now, this might avoid immediate conflict, but it makes us ignorant. And worse yet, we don't know about our ignorance because our controversial beliefs are often those we grow up with. As children, we don't learn about foreign perspectives. We're born and raised on our teams. For example, I am non-religious. I don't adhere to any religious system or participate in any spiritual practices. Like myself, those who grow up non-religious tend to do so unknowingly. I never stopped to ask myself what I believed in because I didn't know that was something I was allowed to do. Religion was obscure, not because I thought it was weird or strange, but because I didn't think about it. I was convinced that I had no reason to acquaint myself with something that didn't affect me. But come freshman year, I attended a religious, specifically Catholic, high school. Now, Catholic schools often shape their academics alongside Catholic teachings. My school was no different, so I had the opportunity to take a theology class. We would study biblical ideas and the role of Christianity in society through group discussions, which meant that, for the first time in this young man's life, he had to address the ideas of religion. Ideas he found unfamiliar, ideas he thought would never affect him. And he, really me, I struggled with this. There were some ideas that I simply could not make sense of. So I tried to just push through my confusion, but that created walls between me and my peers. I asked myself, why do they think like that? Why don't I understand? It became an internal struggle of me versus them, my ideas versus their ideas. Because I viewed my confusion as a battle where one side had to win, I was stuck. One day, my theology class had a substitute teacher. We were discussing how religion has influenced our lives, and one student revealed that she was, in fact, non-religious. She claimed that she was agnostic, someone who neither believes nor denies the existence of a supreme being. In response, my substitute teacher asked her, "Why did you choose to be agnostic?" I was lost, because the question didn't make any sense to me. I mean, if I was asked the question, I wouldn't know how to respond. I've never chosen to be non-religious, that's just what I've always been. But I realized that same reasoning also applied to my peers. They had grown up not religious, so that was what they were used to. I realized that even though the question didn't make sense to me, for someone who had grown up religious all their life, it makes sense to ask why someone was not choosing not to be religious, why someone was choosing not to be what they thought was normal. But the problem is that there is no normal. No two people grow up with the exact same background. Our experiences shape our beliefs, yes, and each of us has unique experiences. So we can't make assumptions about someone's upbringing based on what we think is normal. I realized that if I wanted to see past my wall of assumptions, I needed to stop looking at others from my perspective, and I had to start looking at myself through others' perspective. I needed to contextualize. Social psychologists call this perspective taking. It's the idea that successful collaboration requires an understanding of the context behind our own perspectives. We can especially see the significance of collaboration in business, where cooperation between two or more parties is fundamental to progress. Experts at the Harvard Business Review see 4 different ways to accomplish perspective taking: softening your hardline, hiring from outside, investing in co-location, and finally, increasing autonomy. I find that really 2 of these tactics best apply to our everyday lives: hiring from outside and increasing autonomy. First, hiring from outside means addressing issues using the input of others. In essence, it's diversifying our thinking. Google is a good example of this. When Google News was just beginning, they were being attacked by traditional paper news companies who were afraid of competition online. In response, Google created a team of representatives from these companies, like Reuters, like the Los Angeles Times, for them to explain exactly what and why they were afraid of Google's online news service. So instead of battling each other, Google was able to innovate digital tools to help news companies promote their online content. In the end, Google attracted more users, and news companies had a new platform. The result of collaboration was a simple win-win. Now that's business. For us, hiring from outside would be like seeking ideas that we're not used to. Basically, it's by being social. It's by talking to different people and learning about their different experiences. The question is how we stay social when we're discussing controversial topics. We become silent when we're uncomfortable, and we become defensive when we feel misunderstood. The dilemma that we have is that even if we are talking to new people, unless we have the right attitude, we can't have a productive discussion. That brings us to our second strategy, increasing autonomy. This means letting people talk. Giving enough space and flexibility makes us feel more comfortable discussing controversial topics. Choosing not to push your ideas and refraining from contesting every minute detail allows for a more fluid discussion, where we're able to paint a bigger and more personal picture of our own beliefs. By being less assertive and more willing to listen, we make each other feel more comfortable. Though I did it unknowingly, I applied this strategy at my Catholic school. I began seeking out unfamiliar ideas, and I started listening to my religious peers. I learned about religious ideas, and I also learned about their thoughts on non-religious ideas. By listening to others, I was learning about myself. I noticed that I was able to not only recognize the differences between me and my peers, but also to appreciate them. Our discussions on morality, duty, and virtue were some of the most enriching that I have ever been a part of to this date. We brought different ideas to the table, and that only empowered us. Because unique ideas, are meant to build off of each other. And in that same way, our experiences, no matter how different, are all connected in some way. When we make those connections, we begin to see ourselves as one whole community. We ought to embrace our differences. But in order to do this, we ought to first recognize our differences, speaking up about them, initiating conversation, hiring from outside. As uncomfortable as we may be, it means being respectful and giving autonomy to those who are sharing. Contextual perspective taking is equally giving as it is receiving. It prompts not battles, but balance. It's how we center ourselves using the world around us. I ask that we take a moment to think about how we present ourselves and our ideas. Think about how we listen to others, whether we listen to others, and how quick we are to shut down unfamiliar ideas. If we want to make the world a more peaceful and interconnected place, we need to start by seeing ourselves through others, by communicating with flexibility, and finally, by discovering how our unique ideas are related. It's how I came to make sense of a Catholic perspective, and it's maybe how a few Russian soldiers can save the world. Thank you.